Krause. I've been in the field of industrial hygiene and quality evaluations for about 34 years now. And we were originally going to do this course last winter, right before COVID hit. And well, we all know what happened. So obviously we fast forward a year later and we're doing the course now, and things have changed. And I'll talk about the COVID stuff throughout and as we go along. But if you're looking for a magic bullet, go out and do this or go out and get one of these gizmos, there is no such thing. Ventilation wise, with indoor air quality with office buildings for COVID response, the notion that you have to go out and replace your ventilation system, or you must go out and buy these kinds of bug killers, or you must spray all your ductwork with it. No, please don't do any of those things. The wear your mask, wash your hands, physical distance thing applies across the board, and there isn't really much in the way of ventilation that most people are going to need to do. But we'll talk about some of the guidance and the CDC, the things that have come out from CDC and ASHRAE as we go along. So, excuse me. So generally speaking, indoor air quality is COVID, no COVID, in the office building is kind of a subset of a topic of industrial hygiene. I'm a certified industrial hygienist. Most of my career was concerned with manufacturing environments, industrial environments, exposures to chemicals and smoke and dust and things of this nature out in industry. And late 70s, early 80s, the oil embargo, the energy crisis, so forth, buildings started to get built tighter. Tight building syndrome or sick building syndrome came along with this because people were limiting the energy consumption. So, well, gee whiz, let's not spend so much on ventilation. Let's have the windows not open. Let's have the building all nice and sealed up so we don't have to use as much energy to heat and cool it. And that caused something of a concern for a lot of different people. People started getting headaches and ill at the office and so forth. And they kind of they'd come up with this notion of sick building syndrome or tight building syndrome or indoor air quality problems in a building. So we'll go through what constitutes an indoor air quality issue in an office building. And by and large, we're talking about office environments, not manufacturing or industrial type applications, but offices and convention centers and hospitals and things of that nature. So we'll talk about what is IAQ, what do we mean by that? Air sampling, we'll get into that a little bit. When I was in my consulting days, we'd get calls all the time. Can you come out and test the air? Can you come out and sample the air? And I'll talk about why that's maybe not the best idea in the world later on. Likewise with mold sampling. When mold hit the newspapers back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and mold was all the rage, we got all kinds of calls and all kinds of inquiries to do mold sampling, mold testing. Can you do this? Can you do this? And the answer is you probably don't want to do that. So that was kind of going to be the thing I was going to talk about a year ago. And then we were going to go look at one of the mechanical rooms in the building that we were going to do this in. And it was going to be kind of a show and tell thing. Well, you know, COVID kind of ruined things, but also gave us some more talking points. So I will talk about the what's the advice during a pandemic? What are the considerations that you want to consider for your buildings in COVID wise, and how is that going to be any different? So we'll get to all these things as we go along. Okay, get my thing out of my way here. Okay. Okay. So, I'm sure you're all from different backgrounds, different experiences, different capabilities, but I think by the end of this little talk here, you're going to realize that you can probably do about 95% of anything you would need to do to address an indoor air quality complaint. I'll steer you away from testing and analysis and sampling for reasons that we'll get into. And most of this stuff is common sense. So we'll tell you how to do your own a review of a situation. If people are complaining, if there's some sort of situation, a flood, whatever, something that may have impacted the air quality in your building, we'll give you some pointers about how to get around that. Understanding the myths about mold. As I'll say probably 50 times, mold is everywhere. Mold has always been here. It's always going to be here. Mold is nothing new. So finding mold in a building is like finding water in a lake. It's going to be there. It's a matter of, do we have like runaway mold growth from a flood problem, a water incursion issue of some kind? But broadly speaking, we are not going to, sampling for mold is not something that you're going to want to do. We'll go through some of the basics about COVID-19 considerations for air quality, for just general being in the building, opening your buildings if you have buildings that are open or you're thinking of opening your buildings. And then ventilation wise, what might you do? And I'll give you some resources on all these things. Okay, so what the heck is indoor air quality or indoor environmental quality? It's when people first started talking about indoor air quality, they called it indoor air quality. And then later on, people realized that there's a little more to it than just the air. It's the whole indoor environment. So indoor environment, IAQ, it's the same thing. And it can, even though it's fairly subjective as to what might be bothering somebody, or I'm too hot, I'm too cold, I don't like that smell. Some of these things are kind of subjective as to what might impact somebody, and no two people are the same. So it makes it a little difficult. Some of these evaluations can be a little challenging sometimes, and we'll talk about that. But the temperature, humidity, lack of outdoor air, those are the big hitters, and those are the things that are you can probably figure out on your own, and we'll talk about that. OSHA has OSHA has many standards and regulatory things, and they will come out and they have all kinds of written, documented standards on how to do that are law. Indoor air quality, there is no such thing. There is no OSHA indoor air quality rule, or you can get cited by OSHA for indoor air quality. No, there just isn't one. There's too many things out there, too many like I said, I'm too hot, I'm too cold. How on earth could you possibly set a standard for I'm too hot, I'm too cold? Some people are too hot, some people are too cold. So uh, most indoor air quality type things, OSHA just has no, they have guidance, they have things that they'll advise that you do and try and so forth, but there is no OSHA standard. And likewise with in Michigan, there is no Michigan OSHA standard. So if there's people will do this from time to time. They will call OSHA from, an office building and say, I work at XYZ company and we're on the 5th floor and the air quality is terrible. I want you to come out. Typically what OSHA will do is send a letter to the employer, hey, we had a complaint. Please, here's some ideas for you. Here's some bulleted things that you can look into. We would appreciate if you take care of this, that kind of thing, but they can't cite you for indoor air quality stuff. Typical complaints that we've probably all heard are, typically things that I used to hear back in my consulting days were, can you come out and test the air in our office to tell us if it's okay? And I wish there was a phone app or I don't know. I wish there was something that we could do that there was a one-size-fits-all indoor air quality air check, but that technology doesn't exist. There isn't a phone app yet anyway. There's no go out and get this meter and it'll tell you that it just doesn't exist. So it's a reasonable question. I might ask it myself, but there is no one size fits all. Can you test for mold, or typically black mold? There's no such thing as black mold. Mold is mold. There's tens of thousands of species of mold. They're all over. They've always been all over. They're always going to be all over. Otherwise, we'd be up to here in dead leaves and dead grass and stumps and everything else that mold helps get rid of. But black mold, we'll talk about that when we get into that part, that it's a myth. There's no such thing as black mold. There's no killer, oh my God, this one, if you have this mold, you better run for your life. No, mold is mold. And having mold in your building is not a good thing. You want to get rid of it. And the way you do that is get rid of a moisture problem. We'll touch on that. The worst ones are the intermittent odors. Can you come and check this out? It stinks in here. And as soon as you get there, oh, it went away. It doesn't smell anymore. But every now and again, this puff of air comes through. Well, those are very difficult to investigate. You have to ask a lot of questions, but typically, most people will say, hey, can you come out and test the air for this phantom stink that we have in the office? And the answer is no. If I could, I must know what I'm sampling for to be able to take an air sample or to be able to bring an instrument and turn it on and tell me what's in the air. So I can't, there is no, again, one size fits all, bring out the meter and it tells you what's in the air kind of thing. Or bring out this meter and turn it on and it'll tell me what's in the air. That the technology doesn't exist. It's not that I don't know how to do it or, wow, that's really expensive. No, the technology doesn't exist to take an air sample and have it tell me what is all in the air. I have to test the air for this, for that, for mold, for carbon dioxide. And there's no phone app. There's no such thing. If you want air testing done, you have to test the air specifically for the things that you're interested in finding out. And that can get kind of expensive. So basically what you want to do in the event of a complaint is speak to who's ever complaining and just understand what's the deal. If it's a too hot, too cold thing, well, there's not much you can do, especially if you're in a corporate setting where you have uh, corporate guidelines say we can't heat the air above, we have a maximum of 68 degrees. Well, I can't help you out. I can, help you find a sweater or a sweatshirt or something, but I can't do much to jack up the temperature. And likewise in the summertime, I'm too hot, I'm too cold, so comfort complaints are what they are. You can try to make people comfortable and try to work with them on that. Like I mentioned, you don't want to do a bunch of air testing, air sampling, just not really called for. Your primary tools are your own eyeballs and your nose, and use your head. And then you do not have to go out and buy a bunch of fancy equipment and expensive stuff. You can use a flashlight, a broomstick with a piece of toilet paper stuck to the end of it to see which way the air is moving. That's as good as anything that you can do. So there's some diagnostic things that you can do fairly cheaply. The really expensive stuff you don't necessarily have to do. You want to look at things when people are there. You don't want to, well, I guess if it's your place, if it's your place of business, and you want to do something after hours, some sort of cleaning or some sort of something, then that's fine. We used to get asked, can you not come out during the day? They would want us to do an evaluation, but they would want us to come out when no one was there. And the people in the office space are they're part of the environment. They're part of the whole situation. You cannot do a proper evaluation of an indoor air quality situation in an empty room, especially if you do a little bit of air testing, some direct reading measurements. Carbon dioxide is something we all produce all day long when we breathe. And one of the very few things that we do measure typically on an indoor air quality thing is carbon dioxide. If you're getting a buildup of carbon dioxide, that's indicative that you're not bringing in enough fresh air to the building. So the CO2 measurement is something we typically would do, and you can't do that in an empty building. It doesn't work that way. You have to have, the people have to be there to breathe the air, and you have to do this towards the end of the day to assess whether or not that there's could potentially be an issue with a lack of outdoor air. So you want to, and plus you want to see how people are interacting, what's going on, how, is everybody sitting in one spot, is everybody moving around all the time, how does that all work? Another thing you want to do is look at the ventilation equipment. And I got a diagram in a couple of slides here of typical ventilation system. You want to follow the air from where it comes in the building until where it gets to the people. How does that work? Is it rooftop air handling units? Is there a the fifth floor of a 10-story building is the mechanical floor or something like this? You want to find out where's the air coming from that these people are breathing, and trace it all the way through and see, is this, how is maintenance looking good? Wow, look, we're drawing our fresh air from right by the garbage dump, this kind of thing. So we want to make sure, we want to look at the ventilation equipment for that reason. The occupied space, is it overcrowded? Are people sitting in each other's laps? Is somebody, have, a thing for plants? Is this a room built for 5 people that 20 people are in now? Have things changed? Has there been renovations? do the thermostats work? Sometimes, depending on the size of a building and the complexity of the ventilation equipment, the thermostats that are mounted on the wall either can't be adjusted or are set improperly. They should be all in an occupied, functioning office. Typically, you're going to want to see the thermostats set to supply air at all times instead of auto like they are at your house, where the furnace kicks on to heat the air, and then when it's satisfied, it shuts off. In an office building, typically you're going to want a steady, continuous flow of air throughout the whole day. So sometimes you'll walk into a room, you'll look up, and the supply ducts or the supply louvers have been closed because somebody didn't like the draft or something like this. So most of these things are eyes and ears looking around. I feel a cold draft in this area. It feels like, something's blowing on my feet, this kind of deal. Common sense stuff. If I were sitting in here, what are the things that I am feeling, seeing, and addressing them one at a time? Look, wow, the supply vent is right above the person's head and blowing right down the back of their neck. No wonder they're having problems. No wonder they're always cold, or no wonder they're getting headaches, because they have this constant draft on them. That can be as simple as adjusting the louvers, So they're not all $1 million fixes. Most of them are pretty easy. And then atypical odors. Is there a weird smell? Is there a sewer smell? Might be something to do with a drain, some sort of floor drain issue, a dry trap. Is it just some oddball thing, like you're in some sort of an office building downtown, and it smells like, cow manure or something really weird? What could that possibly, where could that be coming from? Kind of thing. So how is this? Looking around, not so much testing and sampling and analyzing things, but just simply common sense. How on earth can we be getting that odor in this office? And with the intermittent odor thing, typically the best solution to that, once you've talked to the person and you've understood, okay, we get this odor that comes and goes, and I never know when it's going to be here, have them keep a log of when the odor comes and goes. And it turns, maybe there's a pattern. Maybe it's every time it's about to rain, every time. We have a building here where I am, where there's a group of people in a particular office, a particular area of a basement, and they can tell when it's going to rain because they get this odor that occurs. We finally figured it out. We finally got the problem solved. But there was a cracked vent pipe that for the drainage for the building. And every time it would rain, a big slug of water would push through the drain, push out all the air as it went along, like it does. And unfortunately, this building had a cracked vent pipe that every time this whoosh of air would come through, it would stink up the office for 5 minutes. And there was no rhyme or reason for the longest time. And then finally we figured out, every time it rains, this happens. What is that odor? I finally got over there and smelled the odor one day. Aha, I think I know what's going on. So we figured that one out. So it's just a matter of looking into stuff and hearing what people are saying and trying to do your best to sniff it out. Couple things to consider. One is you're not a doctor. People may or may not tell you things and medical stuff, and so forth, but it's not it's not your job to diagnose. You're not there to in a medical capacity. Sampling probably won't help. The thing about sampling is I want to sample something that if I'm going to do sampling, it's going to be, I think there's XYZ chemical or substance in the air. I'm going to sample for XYZ substance to see if it's in the air. Just because I sample for XYZ, I'm not going to know where it's coming from. The samples are not going to, the air samples will not tell me you have this or that in the air and it's coming from over here. It doesn't work that way. So sampling is often not, spending a bunch of money on sampling is probably not the way to go. Just simply because it doesn't, the information that you get from it is of limited value. Sampling for mold is almost never a good thing to do. We'll talk about that in just a second. And there's a couple of resources here. These are links. I think everyone's getting this presentation. You're welcome to it, certainly. If that wasn't the plan, you can have this. And there's a couple of links in here. If I have time, I'll come back to these. The beauty of these resources, this Michigan Department of Health mold site and the EPA indoor air quality for commercial buildings, it's not you and it's not your hired mouthpiece and it's not me and it's not, the CEO. This is the Department of Health for the state and EPA that are putting out this information. And there's some really good stuff in here. So we can touch on that towards the end. The breathing zone. I'm sitting right now. And if I have a job that I sit here all day and I tap on a computer and don't get up much, don't move around much, if I'm not getting a nice flow of air through my breathing zone, through the front of my face, essentially, I'm rebreathing my own air all day long. And I may get a little, snoozy towards the end of the day, or I may just, the quote unquote stuffy air, because it's not getting flushed out enough. These are easy ones. These are really, when you have people, a call center, somebody who's just sedentary all day long, they're, if they're not getting enough air movement through their breathing zone, that's typically what's going on. They're just, not getting enough fresh air. Too much air movement, that's also no good. Draftiness. Oh my God, my neck is, it's freezing in here. I have to wear a scarf in the middle of July. So you don't want to draft. You don't need fancy equipment for this. You need a stick with a piece of toilet paper taped to the end of it and hold it in the air and see if it flutters. That is all you need to do. If you should be able to probably feel it perceptibly on your as you stand there, but if you want to kind of see which way is the air moving, that's all it takes. You can use once upon a day, we used to have a thing that was kind of like a candle wick, a fat candle wick. You could light it on fire, blow it out, and it would smoke for 15 minutes afterwards. And fires, candles, no, not anymore. That I wouldn't dare do that again. So there's other ways to do this. So you finding out which way the air moving is in those kinds of issues is something to look for. Vinyl wall covering. The commercial thing to do several years ago for cleanability, for durability, let's cover the wall with vinyl, and we can wash it off with soap and water, and we can splash stuff on it and just wipe it off. And it's kind of a good idea, unless you get moisture behind that vinyl. If you have a roof leak, a pipe leak, something goes on the other side of that wall, the vinyl doesn't breathe, and you're going to grow mold like you can't imagine behind the wallpaper, and it'll probably eventually start to stink, and what in the world is that smell? And one day you'll open the vinyl and it'll be just the funkiest thing you ever saw in your life. So it is what it is. If you have vinyl wall covering, if you have moisture incursion, that's one of the things you're going to want to do immediately, is drill some holes in the wall. If you have a flood, especially, get right on it, drill some holes in the wall to allow air to get in behind there, so you don't get this plastic bag effect of the vinyl wall covering. This device, this blue thing here, these are a little pricey. This is something that that I've used 101 times. They're about $2,500, and they give temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. There are CO2 meters that can be bought. You can get something from Granger for, $50 or something like this. Carbon dioxide is the one that we all produce when we breathe, and that is something that, one of the few things that is worth measuring if you have a crowded building, to help assess what the issue might be. Duct cleaning. I'm not a big fan. If you've had a situation where you've just had a ton of work done, you've raised a lot of dust, a lot of sawdust, a lot of dirt and dust. Once you're done with that effort, cleaning the ducts is probably a good idea. But just to go into a building, just to do it and clean the ducts, I don't know that it does any harm, but I would just be very forward with the duct cleaning company and just ask them, what am I getting for this? What exactly are you guys going to do for me? If somebody's version of cleaning ducts is to come out and spray stuff in your ductwork, that's an absolute non-starter. You don't want to spray stuff in your ductwork, and you don't want to simply spray deodorizer and make it smell pretty for another, for a couple of days. That's not cleaning ducts. So just like you would anything else, if you're contemplating new carpeting, getting the paving done outside, having a new roof, there's pros, there's cons, there's expense. If you want to do duct cleaning, I'm sure people would be glad to clean ducts, but what am I getting for this exactly? How are you doing this? What, am I going to notice a difference? What am I getting? What's the benefit of you cleaning my ducts? Because whatever's in the ductwork is in the ductwork because it can't get out. It's in there because it settled wherever it settled. And, it's just a very non-scientific, hard to figure out, hard to have empirical data on the efficacy of duct cleaning and why might I do that. But definitely do not let people spray stuff into your ductwork. The last thing you want is to have some sort of chemical exposure to the people that work in your place, or somebody become allergic to something, or somebody that, bad things can happen when you spray water into ductwork. Myths about mold. As you may have guessed, I'm just deaf on mold sampling. This notion that black mold is, that there's a specific killer black mold out there, is absolute nonsense. It is not true. There are thousands and thousands of species of mold. And if we do air sampling for mold, which I've done many, many times, we typically see about the same 15 or 20. And no one is worse or better than the other. The thing about mold is it's always out there, it's always in here. So the best we can hope for is that if I do an air sample for mold, I would take several air samples indoors, several air samples outdoors, and compare and contrast the two. I'm not going to find zero mold indoors, but if the air indoors contains less mold than the air outdoors, that's as good as it gets. There's no limit. There's no number. There's no, if we take samples, we'll compare them to the EPA, blah, blah. No, there isn't. It's wildlife. It fluctuates throughout the day, all day, every day. So there is no such thing as a, I'm over the limit on mold, because it's what might be, what we might find here in Michigan is going to pale in comparison to what they find in Alabama or Florida, you know, where it's hot and muggy all year round. So, and likewise this time of year, winter, it's dry. There's not going to be a whole lot of outdoor mold at this point, and indoors is going to be fairly low. But I may have more mold in the indoor air than I do in the outdoor air because of all the snow cover. So that there's a million and one reasons why you don't want to do air testing. Plus, it's really expensive. So if you do wind up testing for mold, it needs to be done appropriately. One test is not going to tell you anything. Well, gee, we can only afford to do two. Well, then don't do any. You need to do dozens, because it's like taking a poll. It'd be like doing a presidential poll by asking two people and making you know, a prediction about that. No, you need to do dozens of samples to do it any justice. So stay away from mold testing. This is one of my favorite pictures. This gentleman is collecting an air sample for mold in this room. I have no idea why. That wallpaper is that black in the colored, you know, the coloring on the wallpaper is mold growth. Clearly, this was a heavy water damage situation. The answer is not let's test the air for mold. The answer is let's get rid of all that moldy, wet stuff. Let's find where the water leak was, and let's get on with it. Knowing how much mold is in this room doesn't do much good. It's like running into a burning building with a thermometer, you know, to measure the temperature. It's hot. The building's on fire. It doesn't matter how hot it is. And in this case, it doesn't matter how much. This test for mold is not going to determine whether or not we yank out this drywall or whatever that material is. We're not going to base any decision on this. We're going to get rid of it. It stinks. It's ugly. We had water damage. It's going to get worse. We need to fix the situation. We don't need to test the air for mold. So something that used to get a lot, can you test our air for mold? We've had a flood, can you test the air for mold? No. Put your resources toward cleaning up the water and addressing the water damage things. No regulatory standard. Can't say that enough. There isn't a OSHA limit for mold. It doesn't exist. So you, oh boy, I just got to notice that my battery's running low. I hope I can make it here. I tell you what I'm going to do. I have to pause for just, I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Pardon the interruption. Yes, it is technology and stuff does happen. So just hang tight with us for just a few moments, and hopefully Andy will be joining us again in just a moment. Well, let's take advantage of this time or the next few moments. I guess I'd like to hear from maybe a few of you by a raise of hands or put something into the chat. We're hearing from a number of folks of tenant issues where one of the big concerns is air quality, and just giving reassurance of how that will help or hinder with the pandemic situation. Anybody have any feedback on what they're hearing in their own, once we do return to office, any issues with concerns from tenants or stakeholders? I would be happy to allow anybody to chat. I see somebody. I see from, let's see, we have, we are installing well stats in the lobbies in one of our facilities. From another, they seem to want filter changes with the higher MERV ratings, and I'm pretty sure that Andy will be covering certainly that at some point. I do see, was it Greg that had their hand up? Greg, did you have a hand up?
Janet, I did. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes,
Oh,
go ahead.
good. Oh, I was going to type this in, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about duct cleaning. We had at the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center back in 2008, we had a pretty significant fire concentrated in the old primary equipment room. It was a PLD issue. And we had a considerable amount of smoke throughout the building. And we did do duct cleaning at that point in time. And the challenge was there were concerns over, what might have penetrated the air handling system. So I think I agree with Andy's position that duct cleaning can be really exaggerated, and all the other steps that he mentioned are certainly come well in advance of anything as invasive or as challenging as duct cleaning. But that's the only experience I've had with duct cleaning, and it was even questionable at the time, but the insurance company said, "Hey, we'll clean your ducts if you want us to." So, so we accepted the offer. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Greg. Anybody else have some comments that they'd like to make? Andy is logging back on now. We're hearing from one of his colleagues, so hopefully he shall be joining us shortly. In the meantime, I know that a number of folks indicated that they have installed the MERV 13s. So Andy is back with us, and
I'm so sorry.
Let him continue on his way. Back over to you, Andy.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Let's see. And let me share my screen. Okay. And I heard the magic word MERV 13. I don't know if can people tell, are people doing that? Are people doing the MERV, the upgrading their filters?
They have indicated that yes, they are.
Okay, good. And that's about all you're going to be able to do. Let me skip out of this mold thing. The way the typical ventilation system works, the air comes in from outdoors. That's the blue, the light blue. It's the outdoor air coming into the ventilation unit. The orange dots are the return air coming up. They go through the filter mechanism, some sort of coil mechanism, and then they get blown down into the building through the ventilation equipment. Well, in most ventilation systems are designed to function in certain, this dark blue square here would represent the filter. You can't just stick any old filter you want in there. The higher efficiency the filter, the more work the ventilation unit has to do to pull air through that filter. So the COVID, the stuff I've found on COVID, again, there's some, the stuff I found from COVID is this link right here. The CDC has a nice little page, what to do for commercial buildings. And as far as ventilation systems go, this MERV 13, you upgrade the filters if they're not already there to that level. And they suggest they also suggest that you increase the outdoor ventilation outdoor air intake dampers as open as they can go. That can be, I mean, more fresh air is never going to hurt anyone. That's a wonderful thing to do. But when it's 9 degrees outside, you have to heat all that fresh air and it costs a lot of money. Likewise, if it's 90 degrees, you have to cool it all. And that costs a lot of money. So depending on the time of year, you may be able to get away with bringing in more fresh air. That's another guidance. As much as you can, bring in more fresh air. And then this bottom one, whoops. This bottom recommendation here, germicidal ultraviolet, GUV irradiation. I was on a call yesterday with some colleagues of mine. There's a Michigan Industrial Hygiene Society. We have a breakfast meeting once a year with this group and that I'm involved in. And one of the people is, on behalf of one of her clients, is looking into this ultraviolet light stuff because they've been asked to, and they're not finding a lot of reasons to do this. These are examples over here, if I can get these out of my way. This bright blue light is an ultraviolet light system. You can have them inline in your duct, in the with the mechanical system. You can have them stand alone out in a room, like the one below it is. But the information on these things is all over the map as to what they might or might not do. What the CDC guidance on ventilation, which you'll have this link in the presentation, they reference ASHRAE, American Society of Heating, Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Engineers. ASHRAE came out with some guidance last May regarding reopening buildings for COVID. And they're bring in fresh air, crank up the filtration capacity, filtration efficiency is good. They say consider, it's not a demand, it's not a solid recommendation. They say consider these germicidal ultraviolet radiation instruments. They're very expensive, they're very costly to run. And my colleague has not yet found any real good reason to recommend to her client that they do this in the buildings that she's dealing with them on. So I don't know. I don't have any experience with this. The buildings that our campus here, we don't have any of these. We did increase the fresh air back in the spring. I'm sure it's cost a little more heating and cooling wise, but we're probably better off air quality wise for it. We did not do the ventilation, the UV light thing, and we did do the MERV 13. So the filter increased, the filtration's been increased, the outdoor air intakes have been the outdoor air volume's been increased, but we did not do the ultraviolet. But I hear on the news, I hear on, you know, commentary about, well, schools are going to have to redo their ventilation system, or so-and-so is going to have to redo its ventilation system. And other than additional filtration, I don't think there's any recommendation to redo anyone's ventilation system. The 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth bullet here, fourth bullet, HEPA filters. You cannot put a HEPA filter in one of your standard ventilation system units like you have in your building now. If you were an ICU wing of a hospital or a bone marrow transplant wing or something, these kinds of very tight, stringent environments are designed from the ground up to have HEPA filtration, have really high-end air conditioning, heating and air conditioning systems. Yep, the comparison would be my car to a race car. There's no comparison. And they do exist systems that use HEPA filtration, which is, you know, the best, just about the best it can get. But you can't just run out and buy HEPA filters for your existing unit. It won't handle the load. It won't handle the extra pressure that's going to be put on it by having this. You can buy standalone HEPA units that sit in the corner. You've been able to get those for years and years. And so another one of ASHRAE's recommendations is consider these portable HEPA units for certain areas. But that's the ventilation aspect of things. Going back to the more wash your hands, wear your mask, social distance thing. What many companies have done, limit the number of entrances available to people. If you're talking about a commercial property or, you know, a school, anything, limit the number of ways people can enter the building. That way you can control who can come in, who comes in, where they've come in. If there's an outbreak, if there's some kind of an incident, it makes it a little easier to do contact tracing. Temperature screening, we do that here. I know a lot of places do. So not really practical for a retail store or a lot of different applications, but it's just a tool. If I come in with a fever, I shouldn't be allowed to come into the building. Some sort of screening. There's a 1,000,001 phone apps for do you have a headache? Are you feeling these symptoms? Please don't show up to work today. A lot of places do that sort of thing. Designating one-way travel this is all about keeping us away from each other. Closing conference rooms, reconfiguring the office so that we don't have this pile up of people that we have on the top picture. No big conference room meetings, nobody sitting right next to each other, that kind of thing. Those are the steady Eddie main guidelines from CDC we've been hearing since last March. And those haven't changed regarding opening a commercial office building and maintaining and running your building. And as I mentioned, this article from ASHRAE that talks about ventilation, the MERV filters and the UV light and whatnot, that's been out since last May. And I've been looking, every day leading up to this, and it hasn't changed. And I haven't heard anything about any sort of, we're revisiting that or something. It's sound recommendations, sound guidelines, but they haven't changed it since it came out last May. Something else, I'm sure many of us are going through this partially occupied building thing, or we're at half staff, or we're, you know, so-and-so tenant moved out, and, you know, this kind of thing, or we're, you know, half the building's empty, or it's almost all empty. The heating and cooling systems aren't such a big deal, but the water, I know it's a little off topic, but the domestic water, the potable water systems, the drinking fountains, etc. If nobody's using the water, it's going to start getting funky. So there should be some sort of a water flushing program for buildings that are either underutilized or not utilized at all, so that you don't compound, you know, one problem with another. So sorry about the little power failure. I got time if anybody has questions for me or wants me to talk about anything else.
Andy, if anyone has any questions, they can type them in the Q&A box or the chat box before we close here. Okay, it looks like we are all set, and I just wanted to thank you again, Andy, for your presentation today, and have a great day.
Did I send you this presentation?
You did. Thank you.
Okay.
It will
All
be
right.
posted on our website along with your video. Oh,
Excellent.
all right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.